Hey guys, Julian here, and I gotta make this quick because I've got 3% on my phone, probably 2% by now because I have not checked in a couple seconds, but I just want everyone to know, to go along with this video, I just dropped a new techno sample pack on my Bandcamp. It's the first link in the description, so you can't miss it, and yeah, it's got tons of stuff. It's got loops, drums, effects, everything you can need to either get started with techno, you know, if you're just starting producing and you want to just sort of get like a library of sounds to work with, all in one place. This is great for that. Or, you know, maybe if you're more seasoned and you just want some new sounds to work with and a new palette sort of to play with, it's also good for that. But yeah, check it out. Like I said, first link in the description. And yeah, here's the video. So here's what we're going to make in this tutorial. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Julian, this is extremely simple. It's a kick, 2 hi-hats, and some cassette noise. Why are you telling me about this? This is true. It is very simple. But here's the thing about techno, and I haven't actually talked about techno much on this channel, which is interesting because if you watch my live streams, you know I make techno quite frequently. It's definitely one of my favorite styles of music to produce, but I haven't talked about it a whole lot. So I definitely want to give an introduction of my sort of approach to it by saying that, you know, it's not about like how complex it is with this style. It's not about necessarily like what you do. It's more about sort of how you do it, and how you execute your ideas. So, like, what I mean by this is, like, this is really simple, yes, but this gets across what I want it to. It has the kind of feeling I want it to have. It has the kind of texture I want it to have. It is very simple, but it communicates the idea I'm trying to communicate. And yeah, it's definitely the thing you always want to think about with techno, because it is like a very minimal style of music, and you can overdo it very easily. But I will say, interestingly enough, it's a lot harder to underdo it. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. But yeah, so I'm going to be showing you how I made these drums. So the first thing, and probably the most difficult thing here, and the thing I get the most questions about here, is the kick. The kick on its own sounds like this, for reference. And so you may hear this is a reverb kick. And the way that I achieved this reverb kick is actually kind of interesting because it's a little bit hard to get these reverb kicks. If you've ever tried to make one, you know you can't just drop a reverb onto a kick sample and mess with the dry wet and expect it to sound right. You kind of have to finesse it a little bit. So that's what I've done here. Basically what I have is I have this rack that I made, this audio effect rack. We have our dry kick going into it. I'll show you what that sounds like with nothing on it. So essentially what's going on in this rack here is I have 2 layers. I have this chain, which as you can see is empty. This is our dry signal. And then I have this chain, which has all the effects on it. The reverb is 100% wet. And yeah, it's just like supposed to be the wet chain. So if I play these on their own, here's the dry one. I should probably have named these. There's the dry one. And then here's the wet one. And then when you put them together, they come out more. The saturator definitely brings them out a bit more. I'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, so what you kind of have to do here is you need to do parallel processing to get this reverb kick. It's not going to work if you just put a reverb on and make it completely wet and try to mess with it. And then it's also not going to work if you just sort of try to, like, you know, do a reverb with like a send or all of that. What you need to do is do, like I said, parallel processing here. We have our dry signal in parallel with the wet signal. And what the wet signal is doing is essentially I have sort of a few layers of effects here. The first one is this reverb, which is set at 100% wet. The decay time isn't too long. The size is up a little bit. And I did turn up the pre-delay a little bit to give it that kind of like more sort of long sound, I guess. You can hear this is all the reverb is doing inside of the Ableton Reverb. I'll turn it up. As a matter of fact, let me turn this one up. So that's all it's doing. What this amp is doing is just sort of boosting that. So you can see after that, I'm using the amp to just bring out the reverb and almost give it a little bit more crunch as well, as you can hear. And just kind of beef it up. And then after that, I have this EQ8 on there, which actually I might raise a little bit. And that's what's kind of giving it like the low rumbly sound, because it's cutting out all the higher harmonics. And we're getting that reverb going through the amp, which is boosting it up and making it like a little bit more kind of gritty and a little bit louder. And then we get the EQ cutting out the high end. So that combined with the dry kick sounds like this. And yeah, so that's pretty solid so far. We've gone from this to this. So we're almost there to the reverb kick. The last step here is to bring on the saturator. And I did use a preset. I used a bit warmer. So those of you that are going to roast me in the comments for that, there you go. Get your comments ready. The one thing I did do here was I turned on the color knobs, or the color switch. So if you turn on this color switch, what happens is essentially you get these controls, and if you go to the wave shaper, you also get these controls. But yeah, basically they just kind of give you a little bit more ability to shape the waveform and to kind of play around with it and just sort of squeeze it a little bit. So as you can hear, basically the main thing here was this depth. I'll turn it off. This is like pretty much the dry signal. And then when you start turning this depth up, it gave it like that really nice punchiness. And if you listen to the wet signal as well, it really brings out that like kind of rumbliness that isn't just like low end. It's also got a little bit of high end to it. So it's not just completely like rumbling the floor, and you can still hear it a little bit more than you are just feeling it. So yeah, that's really how I made the kick. You know, it's just a matter of playing around with the reverb. And again, you can't just really use a reverb to do this. You're going to have some extra stuff with it to bring it out. And when you're doing that, you know, you just have to think about what is the most effective option. So like in this case, it was the distortion with the filter. And yeah, so the next thing I'll talk about are the next things I will talk about are the hi-hats. The hi-hats are pretty simple. I actually have really similar processing on both of them. Basically, they just sound like this. So basically what we have for processing is, I'll show you the open hi-hat dry and just kind of go through here. So first off, this is the dry sound of the open hi-hat. So obviously considerably different. For reference, this is the dry sound of the closed hi-hat. So also quite different. And essentially what I did was, again on the open hi-hat, I turned on, basically I have this low pass filter, which is very subtle. It's not cutting out a lot of high end, but it's cutting out some high end here, and then it's boosting. It's giving it that little bump, which kind of plays with the erosion later on, and helps to bring out some of the frequencies around there, and just kind of give it like a little bit of more kind of lo-fi crunch without it being like out of my control. Like with this, you know, if I want to let a little more high end through and make it less lo-fi, I can. But for the sake of this, I just have it, you know, cutting out the high end there. And then the next thing I have here is this little reverb. This is actually very short. If you look, the decay time and the size are very small, so it's just giving it a little bit of space, and just sort of, yeah, just putting it in space as opposed to just having it be like sort of a dry audio sample. And then the last thing I have on here is this erosion, which is just doing a little bit of bit crushing to give it that kind of digital crunch. And then, yeah, same stuff on this hi-hat. As far as the notes go on this hi-hat, you may have heard, but I sort of like staggered the velocities, so it's sort of like it goes down and then up. You know, it just kind of plays off of that open hi-hat a little bit better. The only other thing going on here is this cassette noise. Really simple. You might not even be able to hear it that much. There we go. But yeah, so I just have this on there to give it some background texture and just give it that extra layer of just some noise in the background. Again, with techno, it's just so much about texture and sort of like the way things sound. So I like to add samples like this to sort of give it like a bed of sound in the background to give it some interesting human feel. Another thing I do want to talk about really quick with techno is it's kind of interesting because it's a very machine-like music. It's very like, you know, grid, sort of stuck to the grid and very straightforward. But it's always important to add in elements like the kind of things I talked about today to sort of give it, like I said, some more human texture and a more human feel, and even more so just texture in general. Like it could be a super digital or super, like I said, like a super digital, like glitchy texture or something. But it needs to have that kind of feel to it. It needs to have that rawness to it. Or else it'll just sound too clean and it just won't sound right. So that's gonna be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And yeah, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Maybe even share the video if it helped you out. And get my sample pack if you like techno. If you want to support me, it's a great way to do it. It's a huge sample pack, like I said. It's got a ton of samples in it. You probably won't be unhappy. And yeah, I will see you guys again tomorrow with another tutorial.